Africa at a time when the whites in Europe were living a cave-like existence, then immediately their appraisal of themselves begins to go higher. And they don't think that to beg somebody to mingle with them in this country is any kind of progress whatsoever. And I would like to say one more thing, too, on that nonviolent thing, that the black man in America is the only one who is encouraged to be nonviolent, or the black man in Africa, or the black man in Asia. Never do you find white people encouraging other whites to be nonviolent. Whites idolize fighters. They idolize the Hungarian freedom fighters who came to this country and right now can work on jobs that the sit-in students can't get, can live in neighborhoods that the sit-in students can't live in, and can go into public places that the student sit-ins can't go, because they are fighters. Everyone loves a fighter. They respect a fighter. But at the same time that they admire these fighters, they encourage the so-called Negro in America to get his desires fulfilled with a sit-in stroke, or a passive approach, or a love your enemy approach, or pray for those who despitefully use you. This is insane. And we feel as Muslims, until we see white people practicing this nonviolence, until we see white people take Pearl Harbor. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, the American white man didn't say, pray for the Japanese and let them now bomb Manhattan or Staten Island. No, they said, praise the Lord, but pass the ammunition. When we study the entire history of the white man, he believes in violently defending himself. But when we study the history of the American so-called Negro, who is trying to get his rights whenever he has an organization that is integrated, which means it has white advisors who are in top position, usually he's being encouraged to be nonviolent, to be passive, and to be loving, and to be patient. But we have never seen the white man himself display these same characteristics or methods when he's trying to get his own goals accomplished. And right down here in Cuba is another example. The entire government praise the violence of the people who were trying to overthrow Castro. Now, they're condoning violence, they're encouraging violence, and they're praising violence. But when it comes to the black man in Mississippi, now they say they're trying to bring freedom to Cuba, and they'll do it violently or any other explosive way that's necessary to get an enemy away from their house. But here you've got black people in Mississippi who are treated worse than anybody in Cuba. You've got black people in Georgia that are treated worse than anybody in Hungary. And you've got black people in this country who are treated worse than anybody in Africa and Asia ever dreamt of being treated. And instead of someone encouraging them to stand up like a man instead of a boy and do something to bring about a change in these conditions tonight, they're encouraged instead to be nonviolent, to be passive, to love their enemy and pray for those who despitefully use them. And another good example was right up there in Boston, and here in New York, when Rockwell, this Nazi, was going to make a speech down here in the village, and another one in Boston. The Jews stoned him. They stoned him violently. I've never read in any paper where the Jews were practicing violence. They stoned Rockwell in the village, and they stoned him in Boston, and not one newspaper has yet said that the Jews were being violent because they stoned Rockwell, because he was looked upon as an enemy of the Jew, and he hadn't even done anything other than mouthed poisonous doctrine. And today, they tell Negroes that they should forget everything that the white man has done. As Senator Humphrey said at the African Freedom show there at Hunter College last week, he told the Negro they were booing him. They wouldn't even let him speak. They didn't want to hear what he had to say. So finally he told the crowd to forget, don't dwell on the incidents of the past, because they only create bad feelings. Let's look at the future and go forward. In other words, he was telling them, forget what we've done. We know we have treated you. We've committed crimes against you, but forget this. Let's look ahead. Things will be better. Now, Negroes are taught this. Whenever an injustice has been done to a Negro, collectively or individually, he's told to forget that and forgive, because we're trying to make things better now. But and if anybody comes along like Mr. Muhammad and begins to point out uncompromisingly in blunt terms that don't need interpretation or diplomatic language that can be misinterpreted, and he begins to point out these atrocities and crimes that have been committed against black people here in America today, the white man can never deny the fact that he's guilty, but he'll always say, well, forget the past and let's look forward. But the only people who are told to forget the injustices that have been done to them are the black people. But when it comes to whites, right today, you can turn on any radio, turn on any television, read any newspaper, and the Jews have magnified to the world the crimes that were committed against them 20 years ago or so by Eichmann. And they keep you sitting on the edge of your seat wanting to strangle Eichmann and strangle the Germans. This is it's almost like a hate Germany campaign. But yet the Jews are never accused of teaching hate, because they remind the world of the crimes that were committed against them. But when the black man here in America begins to stand up and speak about the crimes that are committed against him throughout America every day, no let up, just different forms, immediately a black man who dwells on that is considered a racist, considered an extremist, or considered someone who is advocating a doctrine that will bring about violence and bring about a deterioration in the so-called good relations that are supposed to be developing between black and white in this country. So we just can't go along with any of that. And I think that until the black man here in America is willing to do and ready to do the same thing that Patrick Henry did to make this country what it was for white people, Patrick Henry, and there's another point. Here the white man takes as his hero George Washington. He was a warrior. He was a general. He fought a war. They take as their hero Patrick Henry. These are men who fight, who fought, who were willing to lay down their life and die for the freedom that they knew was theirs by birth. But these are the heroes of whites. But when a black man in America begins to talk the same kind of talk that Patrick Henry has gone down in history as being famous for, this man is considered as something that shouldn't be allowed to talk. And I think that it's time, as Mr. Baldwin said in a sense, of tossing aside the hypocrisy and looking at the facts the way they are, and not trying to be diplomatic or not trying to be nice, but deal with that problem the way it is. And when you realize that the black man here in America today is just not ready to continue waiting for the white man to make up his mind that he should be a human, that he's a human being too, otherwise you're going to have trouble, then the problem can be solved. If you have a slave and you got your foot on his neck, as long as and someone comes along and tells that slave that he's a man too, well, naturally, the slave is not going to wait for you to take your foot from his head. If he's a man and you're a man, he can remove your foot from his head. But the thing is this, as long as that slave is willing for the master to change his attitude toward him, there's no violence. But when that master is not ready to cease immediately, if that slave really considers himself a man, he's going to stop the master from treating him wrong. He's not going to wait for the master to stop. He will stop him himself. And I think that this is the thing that the white people of America should realize, that Mr. Muhammad's teaching, and it's spreading, so you have to deal with it. Mr. Muhammad's teaching doesn't teach the black man to wait for the white man to change his mind. Mr. Muhammad's teaching is changing the black man's appraisal of himself, and changing the black. And as soon as the black man undergoes a reappraisal of himself and realizes that he's a man too, he says to himself, why should he wait for the Supreme Court to give him what a white man has when he's born? Why should he wait for the Congress or the Senate or the President to tell him that he should have this, when if he's a man the same as that man is a man, he doesn't need any president, he doesn't need any Congress, he doesn't need any Supreme Court, he doesn't need anybody but himself to bring about that which is his, if he is a man. And I think that this is the type of man that you're dealing with here in America today. They don't like to face it, but this is the type of man. That doesn't mean he's an advocator of violence. He wants freedom. He wants justice. He wants equality. He doesn't want it 100 years from now. If the white man has it right now, the black man should. If the white man has it today, the black man should have it today. And if the white man got it by being willing to die for it, then the black man will not get it until he too is also willing to die for it. And this, I think, is the basic difference between the Muslims and the other groups across the country.
Mr. McCummins, could you subscribe to this kind of discipline? Do you feel that you have denied a heritage, as suggested by Mr. Malcolm?
I could not, definitely not subscribe to this sort of thinking. I think that most of the students who...
I think the important thing is the fact that Mr. Malcolm has established, in his own mind at least, that the American Negro has a heritage, and that a person such as you are denying it. Would that be true in your eyes?
Definitely not. I think that while I'm not denying my heritage, I think that one of the things that we're missing the entire boat on is the fact that the issue is not whether we should